Hey everybody, I am along the driveway in the hydrangea row. This is where we keep hydrangeas in grow bags, and it might not look like much right now, but I am seeing the first signs of green leaves, and that's a great sign because we do expect them to show up here in northern Michigan, usually in the first 2 weeks of May. Sometimes it can be a little later and it can be a little earlier, but they're right on schedule this year, so we're happy to see those arrive because that's a sign that they've made it through their winter, and they usually do, because these are all panicle varieties, or Hydrangea paniculata, and these are very hardy. Most of them are hardy to zone 3, which is important because in the grow bags here, they're getting a lot more exposure than they would if they were in the ground. So we need a really nice hardy plant. If they can survive our northern Michigan winter in a grow bag, they can easily survive in the ground. So when we start seeing these leaves, that means it's time to give them their first dose of fertilizer. And fertilizing is really important with hydrangeas because they are this flowering shrub, and they do benefit from a little extra nutrition to be able to produce those beautiful flowers that we all love. So what I recommend right now is, if you want the easiest way to do it, where it's just a no-brainer, go out and get some time-release fertilizer. This is an Osmocote brand. There are others as well, and this is just a basic 14-14-14 time-release fertilizer. We use time-release because we don't have to worry about our measurements quite as much, and we don't have to worry about burning our roots or hurting our plants at all. So we usually put about 2 tablespoons on each plant that's about this size. If they're bigger, we might go a little bit bigger, and we do it around the drip line, and so it goes around the outside of the plant, and you don't worry about getting it right up against the trunk. You don't have to do that. It's more about getting a little further out, but you don't want to go way out here because you'll be wasting fertilizer if you do that. And that time-release fertilizer is going to just gradually release the nutrients into the soil and let the plant use it as it needs it, and it's just a little lower stress. Then we fertilize again 1 month later and 1 month after that. So here that's going to be beginning of May, beginning of June, beginning of July. Now in August, instead of fertilizer, I usually start adding more water every day because I find that if I give them a little bit more water at that time of year, they tend to produce like a lot more color in the flowers later on, and the leaves tend to stay on the plants a little bit longer. At least that's been my experience. So instead of fertilizing in August, give it a little bit more water throughout the month, and I think you're going to see really exciting results, and you're going to have great, big, beautiful, colorful hydrangeas at that time. Now, if you want to kind of take things to the next level, you can, instead of using just your basic time-release fertilizer, you could get a time-release fertilizer that is higher in nitrogen, because nitrogen helps the plant produce kind of fuller foliage. And that foliage is really important at this time of year because you want to push out those nice green leaves. That's going to help it get energy that it's going to then convert into flowers and growth throughout the year. So by giving it extra nitrogen now is going to encourage that leaf growth now. Then on the next round, you can give it your more general type of fertilizer and go from there. That's just kind of the advanced version. If you just stick with the basic stuff every time you fertilize, you're going to be just fine. But if you like to kind of take things and be a little bit more advanced, go ahead and try the other way. Now, I tend to like my first fertilization in these grow bags and the ones in the yard. I like to use a compost because using an organic compost, I find it's just a great thing to do, and the plants really love it. And especially the ones in the grow bag, they don't get their nutrients any other way than what I give them. So giving them some good, rich compost is really a great way to do it. And I use a Michigan-made product called Dairy Dew. And Dairy Dew, they have a couple different products that are available. I tend to use what's called the Dairy Dew Amender, and that's a soil amender, but I use it as a top dress fertilizer, which means I just sprinkle it on the top. I put less than a 1/4 inch across most of the base of the plant, or kind of around the plant, and that's all I need to do. Now, they do make another product called Dairy Dew Tree and Shrub, and the Tree and Shrub is kind of mixed in with some other things. When I use that, I would go more like a 1/2 inch or even an inch in each one. So the amender it's a little bit cheaper and it's a little bit easier for me. It is very strong stuff though, so you don't want to use too much. If you put a whole layer, it's going to do some damage to the plant. So we don't do it that way. So I'm going to go get the gator, and we're going to haul over some of the Dairy Dew. I'll show you exactly how I use the amender, and hey, maybe it'll give you some ideas of how you can add your own compost. If you want to find out what kind of fertilizer or compost is available in your area, just go to your local kind of nursery or independent nursery or greenhouse, they're going to have suggestions. Or a lot of times I find going to like some of the hardware stores, a lot of times they'll have somebody there who kind of knows a little bit more about their fertilizers and that kind of things. So those are my suggestions on there. So let's, hey, get some work done here and get these hydrangeas some food so that they're nice and happy for the rest of the season. So here I have a Limelight Prime. The equipment I'm using today is going to be a waste bin, and I do have some Sluggo because this area had some trouble with slugs last year. And then I have my Dairy Dew tree and shrub. And the first thing I'm going to do is clean out any kind of debris that's in here. So any of the leaves, if I notice any weeds or anything, those get pulled as well. The good thing about doing this is that it also reduces the chance if there's any kind of pests or anything in there. You're kind of taking away a home. So like here, little weed action going on. We're just going to clear that out. Nothing too fancy here. And then once that's out of there, little surprises underneath there. Okay, now I'm just going to take a handful and I just kind of sprinkle it around. I'm not putting a real thick layer on here. If I was using the tree and shrub, I would go pretty heavy with it. But for the amender, the more powerful stuff, I'm not going to go, I'm not going to overdo it. Let's see. So I think that's pretty good. Now that I have the amender on there, on the top, I am going to put some of the Sluggo. So I'm not using very much. So I only want a couple of granules. So that's more than enough. What I usually do is I'll check it in a couple days, and if the granules are gone, then I'll add more. If you use more than this, they tend to just get moldy and mildewy, and you're just wasting them. So by using these couple, just keep an eye on them, and you're going to be good to go. So that job is done. I can't say it didn't come without some injury. I forgot just how sharp the pruned edges of those hydrangeas can be. So wear long sleeves if you're digging around and cleaning out underneath your pruned hydrangeas. And I will note that I put about 4 big handfuls of Dairy Dew around each of those more shrub-sized plants. So those were the 15 and 10 gallon, I think, grow bags. So that just gives you an idea. One bag basically covered 20 plants, so it goes quite a ways. And the other thing was, I'm really glad I put the Sluggo in because there were so many snail carcasses in that one area there. There's a pretty good chance that there's snail or slug eggs in there, so I did want to be preventative. It's probably a little bit early just because I know that these leaves, you know, they're just not mature enough, so they're not attracting those snails yet. But hey, I'm just being preventative, and probably in about 2 weeks when I see the leaves being kind of full size, I will go through and give them a spray with some plant skid, because we do have a lot of deer around here and they love hydrangeas. So there is a little bit of work with these, but it's definitely worth it. It all pays off in the end. I have one tree I want to show you because it's been my little survivor. So these are all hydrangea trees here, and you can see they're quite leafed out. They're on the side of the greenhouse and they're a little bit more protected. So they're going to be a little farther along than the ones out in the driveway that are really fully exposed. But the ones I want to really show you is this guy right here. He's just a little standalone tiny hydrangea tree. And what makes him unique is that 2 years ago, he was actually a very big, proud hydrangea tree and got caught in a wind and rainstorm and he snapped off, which would be the equivalent of like right here. He had no branches, no leaves, nothing, and he managed to bounce back and produce his branches. Was looking great last year, and about the exact same time 1 year later, guess what? Another big rain and windstorm snapped in half again. Exactly the same situation, but look at this hydrangea now. Look at how many branches are in there. This thing is going to be really full, kind of a little perfect lollipop, I think. So we're keeping an eye on this one. I'm really hoping it doesn't snap ever again and it's going to be loaded with flowers this year. The one good thing is he's short, but boy, he has a really sturdy trunk. So I can't imagine this thing breaking again. I think these branches will be more likely to break than anything, but even those are nice and sturdy. I think he's kind of learned his lesson. He's going to definitely be the strongest hydrangea on the property. So here are the grow bags that I planted up with hydrangeas last fall. Now eventually these will all end up in the driveway, but I decided to put up here because it was a little more protected up here. I figured for their first winter, if I was able to pamper them a little bit, I was going to do that, and they definitely have all come through. They're not really much ahead of the ones down there, even though they were more protected. So they probably would have been fine down there, but I figured if I could make it a little easier on them, I would. Now I have a few points that I want to make about grow bags. And first thing is, if you have the option of either planting a tree or shrub in the ground versus in a grow bag, I always refer to plant it in the ground. That's how it was intended to grow. That's going to be best for the plant. But there are some situations where having a grow bag can be really handy. So for us, just the fact that we're selling these, but yet we can have these large containers with large shrubs in them that are going to be nice and showy and great display pieces in our driveway, but still really easy for the customer to be able to just pack up and drive home with. That makes it really worthwhile for us to have these grow bags. I will also say, like in some situations, having a grow bag for people who maybe are in a location where they can't really plant trees or shrubs. So it might be limited space, it might be they only have deck space, it might mean that they don't own the property, or maybe they have like really rocky soil and digging a hole just isn't an option. That's when these can be a really nice way to be able to grow things that you might not normally be able to grow. So can be really nice for that. Also, if you have a tree or shrub that you're thinking that you're not sure if it's going to stay in that spot or if it's going to do well in that spot, this makes it so that it's easier if you want to relocate the plant. You're going to just kind of, you bury it in the hole, and then if you decide to move it, you just dig another hole, put it in there. And that's something you can do with grow bags, is that you can dig a hole, put it into the hole, and test it out there. If you leave the grow bag in the ground, eventually the roots do push through the grow bag, so it's not going to cause any problems to leave the grow bag in the ground. That's not a real big deal. So it's not necessarily ideal. I think if I was just planting it, I probably would cut the grow bag off or try to get it out of the grow bag. But if you left it there, this is going to grow just fine. So another reason why you may use a grow bag. It's also important to think about the size of your grow bag. Now, I've grown hydrangeas in 7-gallon, 10-gallon, and 15-gallon. They've done pretty well in each one. Once you start getting to 15 and above, they are getting really heavy and a lot harder to move around. But the bigger they are, it's better for the plant. Ultimately, once it reaches kind of the edge and those roots fill in, you do need to, we'll say, pot it up or put it into a bigger grow bag if you want to keep that plant healthy. If you don't, it will definitely diminish or reduce the lifespan of the plant, or it could also diminish its growth. I noticed, I think some of the ones that I saw before that were in grow bags too long, it's almost like the trunks got really woody and kind of brittle, and I noticed them cracking kind of in the middle. Now, they didn't kill the plants, they still look pretty good, but it ended up parts would crack off and then it would just be new growth coming from there. So it kind of defeats the purpose of having a nice mature shrub if it just has to keep putting up new growth and it's not, using the established growth that it has. So that's something I noticed. So that's just something to keep in mind with these hydrangeas or in the grow bags, that type of thing. You want to make sure that you are able to kind of size it up. At some point, if it reaches the maximum size of grow bag that you can handle, it might be time for you to kind of hand that plant off to somebody else who can plant it in their yard and then start with something smaller again. But like I said, if you can plant a tree or shrub in the ground, that's always best. But grow bags, there is a place for them, and they are really nice ways to be able to get plants in places maybe that you wouldn't normally be able to, or gives you a couple options that you wouldn't normally have. I should also note that the tips for fertilizing that I gave you today, those will work on any of the varieties of hydrangeas that we grow in our area. So that'll be the panicle varieties, the macrophylla, those are the ones that will either be pink or blue. There's also some white varieties. They're also called big leaf hydrangeas. If you are trying to change the pH of your soil to be able to change one from pink to blue, this would be the time to start adding those additives as well, the colorants that help those types, and it only works for macrophyllas. Also, is it quercifolia, the oak leaf ones, that would be the same thing. And then your arborescents, so like your incrediballs, invincibles, and your annabelles, those can all take some fertilizer now as well.